Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Toronto International Film Festival's Industry Conference. My name is Neil McPherson. I'm the Associate Programmer for the conference, and I'd like to welcome you to our second panel examining virtual reality, mapping sustainable business models. Before we get started, I'd like to remind everyone to ensure that your cell phones are turned to silent, and there's absolutely no photography or filming permitted during the session. We are actually filming it for you. The session in its entirety will be available on YouTube after the event. I'd also like to thank the Canadian Media Fund for co-presenting this event. And I'd now like to introduce our moderator for this discussion, Managing Director of Right Stuf, Wendy Bernfield. Right Stuf's international advisors curate and license content for VOD, pay, digital platforms, and help producers and distributors and sales agents engage commercially with new or expanding platforms. Wendy also assists right holders with strategies such as hybrid distribution, creative windowing, alternative funding, and the business side of new and crossover formats, including virtual reality, to help maximize revenues and audiences. Please join me in welcoming her and panelists David Dexter, Will Maurer, James Millward, and Kane Lee to the stage.
Well, thanks for coming, everybody. It's not often that people want to hear about the business side of VR. So it's a challenging topic, and luckily we've brought experienced experts in the area to talk about some of the projects from the business side that they're working on now. Maybe just to set the stage for a moment, and each panelist will be introduced, of course, and you'll see their work. Where we are is a snapshot right now. I'm living in Europe, although I'm North American, and what we find is there's a lot of activity overseas, beyond the big five and beyond the big brands. Usually, you heard it in the prior panel as well, either from Asia or from Europe, Middle East, and Africa, where the countries are smaller or the languages are foreign and they're trying to reach new creators. They're either buying or funding work that's already existing from festivals and the market. So there's already a demand coming from overseas in addition to what's going on in North America. So it's an interesting perspective to bring beyond the headset manufacturers and the gaming sites, and beyond a platform such as Milk, by Samsung. Oculus doesn't have one. Who else is out there who's now starting to buy with money as opposed to just put it up for free and experiment? And who else is willing to put bucks up to fund? And when they do, what rights are they taking? Are you able to have an afterlife, such as if a VR film is shown in a cinema, can it then go to other platforms for license fees? And does it lead to new funding? Now, some of the examples of the VR cinemas that began in Holland, I don't mean the pop-up cinemas, but professional brick and mortar ones, Amsterdam, Berlin, and Paris. They'll charge, as an example, 12 euros for a half-hour session of a bunch of VR films. Sometimes it's general interest, sometimes they're by different genres, but these screenings have captured the general audience, not the early adopters, but just mainstream people walking by, interested and curious in VR. They enter the cinema, there's 30 white spinning chairs with the Samsung gear on them. They get an introduction on how to use it. They watch a bunch of different VR works. And at the end, they exit and have a cafe where they talk about their experiences. This is a model that's rippling out and has begun in other cities as well. I understand you have one even in Canada now, Vivid, I believe. And some of the broader cinemas are looking at other approaches, IMAX. You'll be seeing some announcements in that area as well. What I found interesting is in Europe, they're starting the cinema, VR cinema founders are also trying to aggregate the content as distributors and then license them on to other platforms, kind of as a middleman. So that's kind of interesting. And the second thing that is out there, as was touched on in the prior session, is in the past few months only, probably since June, we've seen a dramatic increase in SVOD players, like a Netflix, Hulu, Amazon, stepping in to either buy quietly in the background films that were shown at Cannes, Berlinale, Sundance, Tribeca, or to look at maybe funding or having a pipeline with award-winning producers. So that's an interesting step. They all do it in a different way. As you know, Netflix's app is just a way to watch 2D films in a virtual environment. But there are other app creators who add extensions to that, such as converting 3D properties that are sitting on a shelf and allowing them to be shown in a VR form. So that's a new development as well. The broadcasters are getting into this pissing contest. HBO, Sky, you'll be seeing some announcements very soon. Those are premium pay services that are trying to go head-on into the sector in both aggregating and original production, in-house and external. Then you have those that just put their toe in the water a little, you know, a network like who might have a program like Mr. Robot, a series, and then they'll do an extension in VR to complement kind of like a second screen, additional approach. And there have been some really creative business angles that are off the wall that work. In Holland, the grocery chain that is probably like your Loblaws here, Albert Heijn, has for every 10 euros that you spend in the grocery store, your kids or you get little trading cards like the Pokemon cards, but they're enabled with an app that you download for free, and that app opens up short VR films on dinosaurs, and the kids have a game and a dinosaur interaction. Unfortunately, it's in Dutch, but it's worth checking out. And it was apparently one of the top downloaded apps well, I shouldn't give too many statistics away, but let's just say it's very successful. And what they do in the shop is they just give out Google Cardboards, which, as we know, is not the right way to experience VR, but it's a very interesting way to mainstream it at a consumer or child level and then upgrade them. They have upgrade kind of freemium models where you can then collect and get the new headsets. So these are some of the models we'll be talking about today. You also have the platforms like Vice, Sci-Fi Channel, BBC, all stepping in, most of the time doing their own thing. But I think that what has changed this summer is money is coming on the table, and it's very exciting. What I think what might be most useful is to talk with the other panelists about how they each work, what the money is. Is it service work, create something, get paid fees, walk away? Or are you keeping IP, percents? Do you have the ability to distribute onward? You know, so I think it's much more interesting to talk with each of you. We'll start with our Sheridan, Dave, and maybe work our way around the table. You'll see someone from each sector, incubator and research, producers, and effects, tech. Let's proceed.
Perfect. Thanks, Wendy. I'm Dave Dexter. I run the Operations and Business Development for Sheridan's Screen Industry Research and Training Center, CERT for short. We are a department of Sheridan College, and if folks who don't know Sheridan, they're one of the top 20 animation, visual effects, and gaming schools worldwide. And we formed 6 years ago with John Helliker leading the realm, and we're actually located not on a Sheridan campus, but at Pinewood Toronto Studios. So we're in the midst of the film industry, screen industries in Toronto. We have our research offices there, where we have our core research team, plus we have a 10,000 square foot sound stage that is filled with equipment. So over the last 6 years, we've been focused on digital cinema, virtual production, pre-visualization, motion capture, And then early last year, we started the formation of a virtual reality and augmented reality innovation center. And that was directed by the industry, since we have two focuses. We help the pathway for a student to industry, for a Sheridan student, but we also help industry innovate. So imagine you're a small, medium-sized studio figuring out what to do in VR, or you're at a point of we need to do some more advancements in order to tell the story in VR. You can leverage CERT with coming to work with our experts and to have a stage to work in. And so when we take a look at sort of the business models, we're less on the distribution side, we're more on what it takes to produce a specific content piece, or if you're a technology partner, what it is to continue to advance your technology. And so we go all the way up to prototyping content. So to give you a couple of quick examples, Global Core is a studio in Toronto. They came to us and we were in the midst of researching the idea of cutting the cord, doing untethered experience in a volumetric space. And we were doing battery research, also working with laptops, and our motion capture volume. And we were able to help them find a battery and to do an experience like that for 2 hours, so that they recharge the battery and then be able to do the next experience. And if you know, most of the experiences are 3 to 5 minutes or starting to get up there. So that's from a consultant services standpoint, and we're able to offer that at a very low cost for the applied research. Second is, I think everybody is starting to see how important sound and audio is to a VR piece. And we work with, working with another studio, the Post Office Sound, to leverage our mics that we have, binaural and spatial and ambisonic mics, and to be able to continue to innovate, to be able to bring optimum sound into a VR experience. So it's from sort of a content perspective and providing consulting services, but we're also working with the major technology companies, where we're in the process of lining up a multi-year research project with one of them that will address post-production audio and also the idea of an untethered environment. One of the real advantages in working with us is we're part of a college system. Canada is fantastic in funding, so studios can leverage the investment that they're making into producing a content piece or a technology piece and be able to multiply that money. So an example is working with the Ontario Centres of Excellence, where a $5,000 investment will give you the ability to gain access to $50,000. And then you can use our stage, plus we have a whole college of advanced students sitting behind us, and you can leverage the students' knowledge on these projects.
So you'll deal, from all sectors, from students ranging to professionals.
Right.
You're probably working with some of the people on the panel.
Yeah, in conversations or working with.
In conversations. So that's a wonderful, that doesn't exist in very many places overseas, just in Germany, I think.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, it's hands-off to organizations like the CMF and CERC and the Canadian government, because we're also part of a program called Technology Access Center, started by the federal government. So we actually have metrics that basically state we need to work with X number of small, medium enterprise screen industry entities.
Right. And so the model is fees, basically, or do you also take some of the IP or, a percent? I mean, how does it work?
Yeah, so we're a sustainable not-for-profit style model. So
Handy.
ours are more of a cost-plus fee.
Okay.
We're part of an IP. We're part of a college, so IP doesn't remain with us. So it remains with who we are engaged with. With the studios, we just say we like to use it for educational purposes. So it creates a very collaborative, safe environment to work on, either very IP private specific, or to open it up to a collaborative environment among the studios.
Have you had a situation where someone will come for a project that you've done that's under the nonprofit educational umbrella and want to do something with it? Can you take it forward in a commercial way? I guess you have to go back to the rights holders, or?
It all varies to it.
But it happens.
To give you an example, well, one example is we just received a grant, a 2-year grant, to work on global citizenship and empathy within a VR content piece. So from there, if you look at the immersion, how immersive is a piece, and how do you relate to it, and how do you take something that you do find your empathy being created, and do you do an action from that? So very powerful for documentaries or immersive journalism, and we will have psychologists at the end to measure that impact. So taking all that, we'll come back to help the studios create more immersive content.
Well, thanks, David. We'll come back, obviously, but maybe now, Kane Lee, we can talk to you from Baobab.
Sure. Hi, I'm Kane Lee. I'm the head of content for Baobab Studios. We're a Silicon Valley-based animation studio founded by Eric Darnell, who was a writer and director of all the Madagascar films by DreamWorks Animation and Ants, and Maureen Fan, who ran video games as vice president of video games at Zynga. We've been in existence for a little bit more than a year. Really our goal is to create premium animation content for virtual reality, original content that not only is animated but is interactive, brings out your sense of wonder, is universally appealing, and actually brings you into the film as a character. So I'm about to show you guys a little bit of a clip. This is actually a movie, not VR. Unfortunately, we don't have headsets for all of you. But I invite all of you, while you're watching the clip, to get into it like VR. We're gonna break the fourth wall. When the characters come to the screen, I want you to picture that you're in the setting. You're standing on top of a frozen lake, maybe not too far from Toronto. It's snowing on you, and
That's not hard to imagine.
not hard to imagine. And when you look down at your body, you are actually white and fuzzy and have the body of a bunny. So imagine that while you're watching this, and have fun meeting our characters. So if we play the clip now. At the Pop VR lineup here at Toronto. We're very excited to be one of the 5 films selected at Toronto Film Festival's inaugural VR lineup. We first premiered this at Tribeca Film Festival back in April and have been taking it internationally on the festival circuit. We were accepted into Cannes, Shanghai Film Festival, Annecy, Cannes Lions, Melbourne, and now we're here. We're super excited to be here at Toronto at TIFF. It's, as you can see from what we're trying to do, you know, a strong goal of ours is really to get people excited about VR by bringing them into VR. So, you know, I think we're one of the first, if not the first, to really try to make you a character in VR. And that's by making the VR animation interactive, where you're in the shoes of a character, where you can experience the story along with the other characters, that if we do our job right in terms of creating a real story and there being a real narrative arc, and characters who go through something with you together, that you'll want to come back for more and experience the kinds of experiences that you can only get in virtual reality. So that's, you know, that's basically our goal. And in terms of our business model, it's, you know, we're finding a lot of parallels to film and television, but we also have a big part of our team comes from video games and gaming. So it's been this really rewarding sort of melding of minds between two different areas that come with different strengths. And we're extremely excited to be diving into this.
So as an example, you know, you win awards, it's a 6-minute short, it's moving around. You get offers, I imagine, by now, even if you can't say with whom. There's some interest in licensing.
There's a lot of incoming.
Interest.
Yeah.
And sometimes that interest is just, this is not only for Kane, but in general, sometimes it's just for that one piece, but other times it triggers a desire, certainly in Asia, to finance further. Or to make longer versions. Is there anything you can say about short versus long form or longer form and series episodic that's come out of this first film?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of interest. I mean, internationally for sure. I think that certain parts of Asia are actually further along in terms of their market and VR even being known and widely exposed. I think you know, we've been traveling all over the world for this, and I think every time we go to a new part, we're extremely surprised and glad and see what the level of interest is. We are in the middle of a lot of discussions, a lot of different talks, things I can't really disclose yet, but I can say that you know, I mean, there are 3 sort of main areas where deal making is really happening. I mean, the first one is fairly obvious. It's with the headset manufacturers. The second is with third-party applications that aggregate good content. So we have partners like Hulu and Within and Jaunt. And then there's actually, as you mentioned in your opening speech, VR cinema, VR theaters, places that range from pop-ups, new entrepreneurs who are investing in equipment and gathering people and audiences into places to see curated VR material, to big theater chains, multiplexes that are looking to add high-end experiences for their audiences that are already going to cinema.
Right.
So.
And we were talking at the break, all of us, about whether the horror of windowing that we know in the film and television world might crop its head up in VR as well. So far it hasn't been an issue, but I wouldn't be surprised in these deals that are being negotiated by various of us now, if it is. It is at a different level with MPAA studios than with indies, but aren't you backed by larger players also, Comcast and
Yeah, our lead investor is Comcast, Comcast Ventures, and
that says a lot.
I mean, they completely get what we're going for and have been an amazing lead. We're also backed by Samsung and HTC. You know, I think distribution is thinking about not just creating great content, but how to get it the best way possible to audiences, how to draw people into VR and how to have the best partners
At the
there.
moment, it's free, right? To
Yes,
consumers?
at the moment you can get it on your Gear or Oculus for free. And they've been extremely sort of wonderful at helping us in our launch and getting this out to thousands and thousands of users.
Yeah.
And we have a multitude of other financial partners and investors who are helping us with their own sort of business and creative savvy. It's been terrific so far.
Maybe we should switch for a moment to another partner in LA and Toronto, Will, from Legend VR, and the work that you're doing with studios and brands, agencies, producers, and tech is probably good to jump in and tell us about that.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Wendy. We have a short clip while I'm introducing Legend of some of the projects we've worked on over the past 2 years. But my name is Will Maurer. I'm the VP of the VR and VFX divisions at Legend. Legend started in 2001.
Maybe we can play the clip?
Oh, sure.
Sorry, I was just suggesting. There we go.
Yes. Okay. There we go. There it is.
If you want, it's fee-based, or do you also keep IP or a percent, or have some sort of ongoing participation?
Yep. So we started as a service provider, on-set consulting, production, post, working with the filmmakers. So we're getting more into the partnerships and IP sharing and joint ventures for the most part, it's been a lot of fee-for-service type work.
Right, so something like your Legends, the CNN project or Project Empathy,
Yes.
are those, would they fall in the category of partnerships, you know, where you're working on stuff together, or?
A little bit of both, yeah.
Little bit of
You know, we'll reduce our fees if we co-produce or partner with a project, and the Project Empathy that launches today, that was a project with Jamie Wong and Van Jones from CNN, Google funded, and
Amazing, yeah.
puts the viewer, when you put the headset on, you're in the point of view of an 8-year-old girl who's 3 different scenes. The first scene is at a playground. Her mother gets arrested. Then you go to the jail cell. You see her in there, the interaction, kind of feel from her point of view, from the little girl's point of view, what the mother is going through. And then finally you end up at a foster care home, and you see kind of the confined space and what the child goes through in that scenario as well.
And you were telling us over coffee, we needed the coffee for this, that there had been an interesting parallel between the amount spent on CGI versus the returns from a 3-minute, or the interest in a 3-minute VR piece. Maybe you could share that with the audience.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, not naming any specific projects,
No.
but you know, we've done VR projects. We've done live action, full animation, CG, and a mixture of VFX, CG, live action. And, you know, a lot of times it's unfortunate the education's not out there with the filmmakers yet. So being in the post-production field for so long, you know, you get a lot of projects coming across the studio that weren't properly set up and could cost hundreds of thousands of dollars in post and tens of thousands to fix things,
After.
you know, afterwards.
Right.
But, you know, we've seen content from start to finish from anywhere $1 million per minute to produce, and you know, we've done animated content as little as 10,000 a minute.
Right.
So the costs swing widely.
They do swing widely. And it's come up sometimes that when funding deals are arising from platforms, such as in Asia, some of them will actually cover way more than a television deal. For example, there's one platform who would cover 33% of the costs of the budget of producing the film in exchange for exclusive rights in just China. And that's quite a high ratio if you compare it to other terms. And we were discussing that you can't follow the same models, cost benefit, cost return.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even from the filming perspective, or even the storytelling perspective, you have to take the traditional models and take them for what they are.
Yeah.
But that follows through distribution. I think the traditional models don't fully apply, and it's thinking about what the next steps are. And
Yeah. Can we switch to James? Introduce ourselves, Secret Location. You keep your name even though E1 is your new co-owner.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm James Millard. I'm the founder, president, executive producer of Secret Location. Recently acquired by Entertainment One, so we're an Entertainment One company, and which is a great thing for us. So we don't only do VR. We've been around for 9 years. We have done a number of things, a number of platforms. Our sort of methodology was always to accelerate, advance, and enable storytelling in emerging platforms. So VR was an exciting platform when we first got our Kickstarter kit from Palmer and started working it, tinkering. Our first major project was with Fox. It was a service-based project we did for a show called Sleepy Hollow at Comic-Con. That won the first Primetime Emmy ever awarded to a VR project, which was helpful for us. We've subsequently done about 30 projects in VR and have maybe 10 more in production right now. You know, we've done large-scale live action with animation for the LA Philharmonic, which won 2 Webbies this year. We've done fully animated CG content in game engine like Unity or Unreal. We have a VR game that's currently in early release on Steam. And our business models have sliced and diced and transcended and evolved, but we do and continue to do service work, which we own no rights for and just execute, and that's brands, entertainment properties, documentaries. We run co-production models where we will own partial rights with other people and figure out how to exploit those over time, and then we have our own IP. So we have we're about to launch next week a show called Halcyon, which we created with Sci-Fi International, which will launch in 86 territories. It's 10 linear short-form episodes and 5 virtual reality episodes that are intermixed. That will launch on Oculus and Samsung, and eventually on other platforms. So that was a networked, commissioned show. It's a license agreement, so we own the IP, scale that IP. It's important to understand that we're also represented on our commercial side by what was previously called Verse, which is now split into Within and Here Be Dragons, or There Be Dragons, which is Chris Milk's company. So we do a lot of work with them, and then on our own proprietary entertainment side, we're repped at UTA. So those things have become very important to us in terms of access to talent, IP, and opportunities. And so, we combine the ability to create content that people are able to fund with the content that we are able to initiate and then get funded. And the value of owning the rights is a complicated question at this point, and it's obviously dependent on what the medium is and what we're executing within. And everything from just pure play 360 video, which can be distributed in YouTube and Facebook, all the way up the line to full dynamically rendered game engine work that takes a much higher development or distribution platform and technology platform to run like a high-end gaming machine in an Oculus or HTC Vive or PlayStation VR. So for us, this is an evolutionary, iterative model for a business. We also do a lot of work in augmented reality and are working with some of the bigger players in that. We've been paid by every single one that I can count of the platforms that exist in VR and AR today to make content for them or with them. And then those also have enabled us to make our own content as well. So it's all over the map. There's no silver bullet. There's no model that just personifies or quantifies what this is. You can draw anecdotally learnings from film, distribution, theatrical, and VOD and all of those TV apps, and in some ways, experiences like a Sleep No More that ultimately take into account, human beings in places to have an experience that can't be had at home. So everything that we're doing is in service of storytelling. The technology is an enabler of that story. VR is an important platform that will continue to evolve, but we will transcend whatever platform is most effective at telling the story and most effective at gathering that audience and ultimately enabling a business model so that we can keep making content and make it better and better as we go.
That's great. Well, you've certainly spanned all parts of the chain, going back to the earlier cross-platform transmedia days. And the parallels are there. They get more complicated when they're multinational and multi-window.
Yeah, and just to be clear,
Yeah.
windowing is typically pretty bad for audiences.
Sorry?
Windowing is typically pretty bad
Horrible.
for audiences, but
Horrible.
really good for business.
Yeah, it is.
So if you want to make money in content right now, windowing is still a better way to do it than to just do a
Absolutely.
singular buy.
Yeah, because often really beautiful work is just given away free everywhere, all around the world, and then it's more difficult to monetize it after than if there's a sort of almost the old-fashioned sense of premiere and then a pay service or a monthly service. And many are in development. I wouldn't be surprised if some are announced even at MIPCOM. It's going to be a real pissing contest in the coming few months. And that also leads to bubbles and bad business decisions. So I think just keeping close perhaps to the creative story and keeping the partners clear will help. Have you experienced anything with geo-blocking coming up with the stores? Like, let's say there's a network, a broadcaster who commissions you, Sci-Fi hypothetically, or someone else, and they offer the stuff in the store everywhere, but you might have
Yeah, they
deal
don't have the
opportunities.
rights to do that. We have the rights to do
You'll
that.
keep the rights
So,
to do that. Okay.
you know, we
Good.
work with our partners to figure out what the best plan of attack is, and obviously it's very collaborative. But at
Okay.
the end of the day, if somebody has licensed a piece of content from us, then we control the distribution of how that rolls out. And if it's advantageous or more advantageous, then we have to take a windowing approach.
Yes.
And if alternatively it's more advantageous not to, or to take advantage of a global release or promotion we're getting from
Yeah.
platforms and, which is not windowed, it's global,
Mm-hmm.
then we have to sort of do a cost-benefit analysis of what are our goals and what do we want to
Yeah.
achieve.
It is, in that sense, very similar to indie film and switching the order of windows around to premiere things online and then later bring them out to theatrical or premium, shaking up the order. But you don't think that geography is a problem. It's deal-specific per film.
I mean, I think both
Yeah.
things can be true in the same conversation, and geography is a problem, and today it's still the best way to make money is to slice and dice and split it up and do it territory by territory. But
Yeah.
it just will take an evolution where, I mean, you know, it's in television, you know, it depends on your show, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're David Fincher and Kevin Spacey, it was much better to do just an overall global
Sure.
deal, get it done, get 2 seasons of your show greenlit and keep rolling. If you are more based on a network show model, it's better to take it to MIPCOM and sell it territory by territory and make a lot more money in that studio and windowing system. So
Yeah.
I think it just depends on like what comes to the table as the opportunity, and then you have to pick how you best utilize the experience. And what's unfortunate is that we're still in a zone across all content formats where what's in the best interest of the audience is not necessarily in the best interest of the business model as a studio or a creator. And that's an unfortunate transition that we're all having to go through.
Yes.
And you know, previous media models were based on size or containing scale to be regional in order to be able to transact value over time. And being able to control the content format. And today, those content formats get released much more organically, or will get released whether you like it or not. And the question becomes, how much is that control worth monetarily versus the perception of being able to have a global audience all talking about something at the same time and all moving it downfield at the same time? And I mean, I think everyone wants to make a model in the best interest of both, right? Like
Yeah.
we don't want to lose our shirts in order to give the audience what they want, and at the same time, we
need
don't
to-
want to be blocking an audience experience because they'll break that blockage in some format or another. So, I mean, we haven't started to really see like piracy yet in VR, although it's not hard to imagine how easily that is to disseminate apps that get downloaded. There just isn't a big enough audience right now to worry about it, and there isn't a high enough value piece of content that's being gated by a paywall or an SVOD service that people are breaking through. So we'll see if that becomes a fundamental factor in decision making. But today, you know, everyone's still testing, is it a pay-to-play model, is it a TVOD model, is it SVOD model, is it AVOD, is it just based on one window being so important that,
Yeah.
like you said, can subsidize the majority of the cost, and then you're able to do other things in other territories.
Yeah.
But it's, you know, every 2 weeks it changes, so
I
we're all
mean,
figuring it
it
out.
has been interesting that only in the past few months in the pure indie film sector, I don't mean the major studios and the stuff that you're doing, but you know, earnest Danish, Dutch, Italian, Spanish filmmakers who have done their first VR film are suddenly receiving a dizzying array of of opportunities, and they immediately want to say yes. And you know, when we discuss it, I say, well, listen, if that one's interested, maybe you need to see if the other competitor is interested, and that one wants the world.
That
Yeah.
just goes to the importance of
Yeah.
distribution and
Yeah.
a distributor who helps people make decisions. Because, and I don't want to like dominate this conversation,
No.
but if this was directed at me, like what I would say is that we've had a first wave of very organic creation, right? Like for the most part, everybody who's made anything of substance right now has done it on a development kit, not an actual piece of consumer-based hardware. So you have a group of people who are organically interested in creating things and trying things, and so there's the first tier where people are just excited that anyone has
Yeah.
interest in what they've made.
Yeah,
and that's a very it's an exciting
lovely.
development, but then it has to be measured against what's the long-term game plan. Because as much as it's exciting to make content and be validated for that, we all need to get our rent paid, otherwise this train stops.
It stops
or
quickly.
at the very least, the quality of the content doesn't improve over time, and that's something that I think everybody wants, audiences and creators. So the question becomes, in my opinion, how do we move it forward in a way where we are gently bringing people along to say that this content has value both in the short term and the long term, and at the same time enabling a maximum amount of distribution so that all boats rise with the tide? Because unless we get VR in the hands of everybody, like any platform, it
It's
becomes
academic.
a very exclusive experience that isn't transactable. And the only way this becomes monetizable is with large demand.
I'd like to take some questions also from the audience. First, a last round of, if you had one piece of advice for our audience of the next year, just looking in the short term, what would you think is the best way forward if you are a VR creator? And then we'll get all your questions. Let's go around the room.
Probably the biggest thing is jumping into it. From our perspective, is leveraging innovation centers like us and leveraging the funding that is available out there to experiment, to develop, and to produce your first content piece or your third content piece.
Okay. And Kane, anything?
I think figuring out the why of why you're doing this is the most important. For us, the holy grail is to push the boundaries of storytelling. That's our long-term vision. That's why we're going to stay steady and bring in the best talent that we can. On top of that, we have to be extremely nimble and flexible. So we're not planning year-long productions on things when we're in a very ever-changing marketplace where tech is changing every week, where we get new developments every day.
Yeah.
So we have our we know what our why is at Baobab. We care about characters. VR is all about, everyone knows that VR can create new worlds, and that's why animation and VR were made for each other. But we really believe in the heart of the story and the characters, and so that's our long-term vision, but we're going to stay nimble and flexible and adjust with the changes that are going to come. It's going to be a roller coaster ride.
Will, how about you?
Yeah, I'd say from the creative perspective, don't use VR as a gimmick. Even from the big companies down, there's a lot of people just jumping in and saying, grab a camera, a 360 camera, go out and capture something. Go on set
Right.
today and figure it out.
Yes.
And until the storytellers and the filmmakers really understand and develop content for this medium, you're not going to see good content out there. You'll see VR content that's not properly created for virtual reality. And from the consumer's perspective, I'd say, don't give up on VR, because there's a lot
Yeah,
of,
there's
the
a lot of
majority
bad
of VR out there right now is pretty bad.
Yeah,
There's good stuff out there, but the good stuff
is lost sometimes.
is lost
Yeah,
within the bed.
hard to
And
navigate.
the point of entry is typically Facebook 360 or YouTube, and people are looking at that content, and even some of the more expensive content out there wasn't well thought out from a story perspective.
Yeah.
Even if it looks good, it's
Yeah.
still not entertaining. So
James.
Yeah, well, I mean, I echo, the why are you doing it? I mean, we frame it a little bit more and ask yourself not what you could do, but what you should do.
Right.
Because there's a lot of things that can be possible. And this is this is an evolution of a platform that this isn't the first time these kinds of questions have been asked, right? Every time a new platform or we jump to the next platform, radio to TV, we have to use conventions of the previous means of production, and then we have to make new conventions that work. And that takes time and iteration and experience and trial and error. And there's so many variables at play right now. So the headsets are not mature in the ecosystem yet. The software platforms are the worst version of Betamax and VHS and everything when you're trying to distribute between the platforms. The camera equipment and hardware to create the content is not there yet. The computer-based tools are using previously created tools for other purposes to engineer the content in this. So there's a number of limitations and yet at the same time, every 3, 6, 12 months, it improves dramatically.
improves,
And the reality of it is that unless you get in today and start doing it, by the time it gets to a point of maturity, which hopefully everybody on this panel believes is possible, then you're behind the 8 ball and you can't create the content at the highest level. And at the same time, if we go too hard today and bet the farm on today, will intrinsically be disappointed just because the market size is not big enough to get to a level of monetization, in my opinion, that gets it to a point of transacting at the level of cost to get to production. So we're all taking bets and moving things forward to try and do the best we can and learn and stay alive until this hits maturity.
Well, James, let's get some questions from the audience while there's time. This gentleman, yes? Is it working? And
Oh, talking. As a film editor, I'm selecting the shot that, I'm asking really the cameraman to get me, and I'm putting the story together piece by piece like that. So the Oculus piece that you showed was, it was almost like, it was just like a wide version of it, but you're really hanging on that point of view shot. So is this a new language that we need, a film language? I don't really understand how that part's going to work, because for an audience to see it, wouldn't it be better to have, instead of everyone wearing face gear, to have a theater like this projection so that a group can see it? Would that be a better model for the business, so that it's going to be an immersive experience for a group rather than this kind
you
of
wanna
like
take that?
isolated thing?
Can I just jump in? Like, I think that what's really confusing, and it's a great question. Here's what's really confusing. Like, we could take the next 4 hours, and I'm not trying to, and explain the variety of what's possible in virtual reality, right? So, on one end, you have 360 video, which is a storyteller's locked, rendered, linear approach that is, they might direct the attention, but ultimately a person has a free field of view to see, but that story is moving forward whether you do anything or not. Then on the other end of the spectrum, you have full interactivity in VR, where you are fundamentally creating or affecting that story. That the latter is not really a social exercise unless you have like somebody driving that, or you've figured out some like community way of making united decisions. There are, in the US and Korea, CJ and Barco have made 270-degree screens. Barco Escape and ScreenX from CJ, which is the largest theater chain in South Korea. So you can sit in a theater and watch a 270-degree version of a movie. But at the end of the day, it's still a passive experience. And the question is, how active do you want the participants in VR? And most people who are purists of VR would say that the evolution of storytelling is enabling the audience to actually have an impact in that story. And if that's the case, then it's hard to do that on a communal level.
Yeah. Let's maybe take that depth of question out to the coffee break and get some more from the room. I see someone in the back. Yes?
Yeah, so my question is in regards to budget. What's the scale in terms of what you guys know of what it costs to make a live-action film versus a live-action VR film? What's the...
Cost per minute, in other words. I think we covered that. Let's go through.
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough question to answer, and that's the first thing clients want to know. I mean, you could do live action VR content for cheap or expensive, or the middle ground.
Same as any film.
It really depends, and we even look at shooting nodally, different quadrants versus shooting in full 360. What's best for the story? What's best for the budget? Trying to break that down with the filmmaker, but I think that's on a scene-by-scene basis, or even shot-by-shot basis. You have to go through, and one shot could be your entire budget. So they don't really equate one-to-one as much.
It's like to that previous question, it's like, is it just 360 video shot with 4 GoPros and a little handheld, or is it like, are you using reds and shooting quadrants and having a crazy post-stitch that you have to put together?
I see some more questions in the audience. So we start over here. Yeah?
So if you don't mind, then maybe
can't hear you.
Then maybe I'll be first, then I'll pass it on to this gentleman. Well, can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. I've been hearing a lot about the virtual reality, and I even tried the glasses. I mean, there's the Samsung Gear and everything. But then I'm worried as a viewer, because I do write about films, I review the films, and then here you go, the virtual reality is coming. So let's forget about the film criticism and everything. I want to enjoy the storytelling, and I understand that the clients, the big film production like companies, they want to make the film around the VR, but what about the viewer? Are you not afraid of losing their attention? Because while you watch the VR, you look around, but about the storytelling, that may disappear, and even the concentration, attention, I don't know.
Well, again, I think, treating VR as a separate medium. You're not telling a traditional story for VR. You're writing a story specifically for VR, and the way you shoot that, the way you direct a viewer's attentions through different technology, or audio is a big game changer for VR. Visuals, camera orientation. I think, as you plan out your story, you'll allow for the viewer to ease into that. You don't want to give them whiplash. You don't want them trying to figure out what they should be looking at. So that all has to be taken into account as you're telling a story.
I see some other hands in the back.
I can
We'll
just add
flip
a
through.
quick sec to
Oh,
that.
yes.
And there's a lot of research going on how does a viewer engage in the story within the headset, from head movement to eye tracking. And so I think that's going to help the studios learn how to make the story more immersive and more engaging to the audience.
The data that
that's
comes
coming
back.
from that.
Question in the back, I see.
Hey, as an actor and a fight performer, I'm seeing a lot of this come through more in casting for live action. And I'm just wondering if you guys have any tips on where fight performers can go to gain experience on VR, and any insight as to what producers and directors are looking for in terms of experience for actors.
That's a good question.
So are you saying that casting is happening with 360 cameras?
I'm seeing a little bit more in the indie world, and I mean, I lived in the Netherlands for a little while too, where I saw it sort of come up. So as far as like gaining experience doing live action and fight sequences for VR, obviously that's a whole different beast. This is a little off topic, just was wondering if you had any tips or insight as to where we can go to actually practice this, like any studios around the area, or if you've seen what producers and directors are typically looking for.
I mean, I've heard that theater acting is one of the best ways to train for a virtual reality acting, because a lot of actors who do TV and film are very aware of the camera and where it's shooting, and theater is live and electric, and people can view you from all angles. So that's probably that's one thing that I've heard from a lot of filmmaker friends is a great way to go as an actor.
Okay, one more question, because we're almost out of time. You can catch us after on the break as well. Yes?
Sure. Hi, my name's Tracy, and I'm a VR filmmaker. My film Eaglebone is at the festival this year. And my question is, how do you get your film into festivals and just disseminate it? Even with TIFF, it was only about a month or so ago that we received word that TIFF could accommodate VR this year.
I think most of the major festivals are accepting VR submissions
By now.
It's becoming more common. I would check all the major festivals. The sites tell you what you could submit for, or just contacting the organizers of the festivals.
Yeah, and also just reach out to the programmers at any number of festivals and see if they're interested. I mean, you could be the first one.
You could
at the
pioneer
festival.
it in some countries. All right. Much thanks to everyone on the panel, to the audience for bearing with us, and to TIFF.